and thank you for joining us this morning for this overview of the new digital test for the Connecticut SAT that's going to be administered for the first time about a year from now. I also want to thank everybody who had a role in administering the test that we just administered. I know it's a lot of work, and we're really appreciative. It went very smoothly this year, so thanks for all your hard work. I do also want to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to the Connecticut SAT School Day website. Additionally, I know this week is Educator Appreciation Week, and we are very grateful, as I said, for all the work that you do to support our testing programs, the Smarter Balance, NGSS, and Connecticut SAT School Day. My name is Michelle Rosado. I should have said that in the beginning, and I work at the Connecticut State Department of Education, and I'm supported by a couple of my colleagues who I'm going to let introduce themselves. Thanks.
I guess I'll go next. Good morning, everyone. My name is Deirdre Ducharme. I work with Michelle and Abe at the Connecticut State Department of Ed, and it's great to have some time with you here this morning along with the College Board. Abe?
Yeah, thanks, Dee. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Abe Christ from the Performance Office. Just to echo what Michelle had said too, thanks for all your efforts during the last administration, and thanks for attending today's webinar to see what's on the horizon. And thanks to our colleagues from College Board for helping out with this too. Thank you.
So hi, everybody. I'm Adrienne Kupfer from the College Board. I have the pleasure of leading the state team here at the College Board. So I work with all the folks who are involved in state contracts. And I've had the pleasure of working with Connecticut for a number of years. I'm really happy to be here with you guys this morning and to be able to share more information with you about what's coming for next year. I have two colleagues with me today without whom we wouldn't be able to make this all happen. So I'm going to turn it over first to James and then to Keisha to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Adrienne. James Wilson, relatively new to the College Board, though Adrienne and I have known each other for many years in my 2 decades in education, some of which was in New England. So I used to teach in Darien, so it's nice to connect with Connecticut this morning and when I get to go out and visit actually in person. So good to see you this morning. Keisha?
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. My name is Keisha Smith. I work under the College Board team to support the accommodations that we do for Connecticut SAT School Day, and we work very tightly in conjunction with the CSDE team to ensure that the accommodations are in place for students for test day.
Awesome. Thank you to both of you for introducing yourself. Michelle, do you want me to take it from here?
Absolutely. I just wanted to remind everyone on the call, you don't have the ability to unmute your microphone, but we do want to take your questions. You can pop them into the chat, or at the end of the session, we'll do a raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask them that way. Additionally, I've put the link to the slides in the chat, so you can have those. We'll also email them out to you as well. So thanks, Adrienne. Take it away.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us this morning. I will also echo what everybody from CSDE has said, which is thank you for all you did to administer the assessments this year. We know it's a lot of work, and thank you for all that you've done. And we're hoping actually that as we move into the next year, we move into our new digital SAT, that you're going to hopefully find it to be a lot easier to give this test. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the test today. We're going to go over kind of an overview of what the new digital SAT is. Then we're going to talk about the test specifications and multi-stage adaptive testing. We're going to talk a little bit about the technology requirements. We'll talk about some of the practice resources that are available, and we'll talk a little bit, and not in great detail, but a little bit about accommodations. And then we'll talk at a very high level about preparing for spring 2024 Connecticut SAT School Day. So today's session really is an overview. We are going to have a lot more detail to give you when we get back, when everybody gets back from summer vacation, and we can kind of look and really work together throughout the full year to prepare you. But we did want to make sure you had an overview today, so you just had a sense of what's coming at you. As Michelle has said, please put your please put your questions in the chat, or you can hold them till the end and feel free to raise your hand if you want at that point. But I do also want to say you may have questions that I may not have answers to today. And so I promise you that if we don't have answers to your questions, I'm going to get them and we're going to follow up with you. So it's my hope that kind of the questions that we have today can be the beginning of kind of a Q&A type thing that we can have available for you guys and kind of build on as we go throughout this work together over the next year-ish or so together. But like I said, I may not have every answer, but I will get an answer for you if I don't have it. So with that, let's kind of get into talking about what this new SAT is. So let's talk about the digital SAT school day, the new digital SAT school day. I know that you guys have experienced a different digital SAT school day so far, but let's talk about the new one. So I think there are 4 important points that I want to make about the new digital SAT, because I think it's helpful to kind of frame it in why we did what we did and why we are so excited about moving forward with this. We wanted to put together a test that was going to be easier for students to take. We were very thoughtful about the time it takes for students to test. We wanted to make sure that students have less testing time and that you as educators have to plan for less testing time. So we wanted it to be easier for kids to take. We also want it to be easier for you guys as educators to give. We know that the existing kind of digital solution that you guys have experienced for the past 2 years was not easy. There's nothing about it that was easy, and we know that. And so what we're moving forward with was designed to be significantly easier for you guys to be able to give to your students. It's also more secure. We've done a lot of work to make sure that test security issues are, and a lot of the test security concerns we had with paper testing, but even with kind of our older digital product, that we could have a more secure test for folks, that we could have a platform that supports a more secure test, and that ultimately leads to fewer issues for schools as well. And then we wanted to make sure that the test was more relevant to students. And so we made some changes in the test to make sure that it is more relevant to students. And we'll talk about that as we kind of go through here. So there's a lot changing, but there is also a lot that's going to be staying the same. The first thing is that it is still focused on college and career readiness, and it's going to remain on a 1600 scale, so no concordance is going to be required. It's going to continue to be given in a school like you do for Connecticut SAT School, for Connecticut SAT School Day, or in a test center like students will take on the weekend. So it is going to continue to happen in a setting like a school or a test center. We will continue to provide free world-class practice resources. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. It will continue to provide students with access to scholarships and other kind of national recognition programs. And it's still being designed to support all students so that we can make sure that that all students have the ability to show what they know, do their best work, and support students, support students who need testing accommodations, students who have EL supports, all of those kinds of things. So the one thing that I do want to call out here, though, is, especially given that I'm talking to you guys as educators who spent a lot of time giving this test over many years in Connecticut, that we spent a lot of time in our pilot work before we rolled it out to make sure that the test that we were designing and the process that we were designing was something that educators felt was easier to give. And I think we've done a lot to make it easier, to make it something that you as educators don't have to do as much kind of technical stuff on test day to make it happen, but also that you've got tools within the testing platform to be able to monitor how students are doing, to be able to keep an eye on what's happening, to be able to know if there's a problem and how to support that student. And also, kind of the processes of completing paperwork after test day is not going to be there anymore. So, even with the existing digital tests that you guys have experienced, you still had to complete paper IRs, and there was still paperwork to fill out after test day. As we look with our new digital testing, so as we look with our testing platform for students, which is called Blue Book, and our test monitoring system for proctors and test coordinators, which is called Test Day Toolkit. All of what you need to do on test day to kind of wrap up testing all happens within Test Day Toolkit. You're not going to have to do any paperwork to complete testing. And so we wanted to have it a much more kind of integrated experience, and one that requires less of you on test day, so you can get back to doing the things that you need to do, which is working with your students. So a couple of things about the digital SAT. We designed it so that it can be given on the devices that students use currently, that students are using in school, that students are using at home, and that they're the devices that students are familiar with. We also wanted to make sure that there's kind of a wide range of topics covered in content in the test. And we wanted to make sure that it is a useful tool for far more students. And so a lot of that is going to come, and we'll talk about this, the kind of usefulness of it when we get back in September, really. But we'll talk about a lot of the tools that we're building out to make sure that students get a score, but that score, no matter what their future plans are, that they're getting support to figure out how they can make the most of the opportunities that lie ahead of them. So let's talk about, you want to jump in, Michelle?
Sorry, I just want to jump in. Not that this presentation is not about the PSAT or the PSAT NMSQT, but I do want to just let everyone know that the things that you're talking about apply to the entire suite of assessments. And although we don't require those assessments in Connecticut, I don't want people to be confused. I want you to know that everything you're talking about does apply to what you're going to be doing in the fall.
Thank you. That is an awesome call out. Yeah. So everything that I'm saying, I'm talking very specifically about SAT, but the platform is the same for PN or for PSAT and MSQT. The kind of structure will be the same for PSAT and MSQT, and the tools that kind of stuff that we'll be referring to are also the same for PSAT and MSQT. So I'm focused talking about SAT because we are talking about kind of getting ready for it next spring. But the stuff that I say will really in a lot of ways be applicable. You're going to notice, and especially if you do give the fall PSAT, there will be some different processes that you're going to kind of experience for state testing because of some of the differences of state testing. But the stuff that you're going to see in the platform and the design of the test and all that kind of stuff is going to be kind of the same across assessments. So thank you for calling that out, Michelle. So let's talk about the test specs for the SAT. If we look at the new digital test specifications, if we look at the kind of existing tests, the ones that you guys just gave, whether people were giving it in paper pencil format or, as you guys did, the format that was available through Cambium, even in that digital format, it was essentially a linear, like, paper page turning test. And we have really changed that model for the new digital test. So if you look at the current test, if we look at reading and writing, current test that you just administered, there were 96 questions in 2 sections. It took about 100 minutes total, and there were kind of a set of questions. And then if we look going forward, in the new digital SAT, there's going to be fewer questions, 54 questions total, 64 total minutes to take those tests. So students get a little bit more time per question. And instead of being set-based questions where there's a reading passage and 3 or 4 questions based on that reading passage, each question is going to be is going to be a discrete question based on particular content for that particular question. And then if we look at the math, in the math section, currently, what you just administered, there were 58 total questions in 2 sections. One was a calculator section and one was without calculator, about 80 total minutes of testing. And there were discrete and set-based questions. So there were individual discrete questions, and then there were sets that kind of looked at a particular little passage of information, and then a couple questions based on that. The majority of the test was multiple choice, and there was about 22% of the test was student-produced responses. Now, if we look at the new digital SAT, there'll be 44 questions, and it's going to be just a calculator test. There's no section where a student can't use calculators. And there's going to be about 70 total minutes of testing time. Students, again, will get a little bit more time per question. And then, so even though that the test is shorter, they're still getting a little bit more time to be able to formulate their answers. And these will all be discrete questions. They'll be multiple choice questions, and then about 25% will be student produced responses, but they will be discrete questions. It won't be a set of a passage of information and then a few questions based on that one passage. It will be discrete. So how are we going to do this thing? How are we doing this thing where there's fewer questions, but it's still just as reliable and valid? What are we going to do to make that happen? And so what we're doing is we're doing multi-stage adaptive testing. So multi-stage adaptive testing is different than item adaptive testing, and you may be very familiar with item adaptive testing. In multi-stage adaptive testing, what we do is we deliver sets of questions. We call them modules, and I'm going to show you a graphic in a minute to help you kind of understand what that's going to look like. But students will complete a module, and then from their answers on that module, they will get routed to the next module based on kind of the performance in the first one. Whereas with item adaptive, each question that a student sees is based on their performance on the question before. There's a navigation element, and part of the reason we chose multi-stage adaptive was that in a multi-stage adaptive test, students can go through the test and then they can navigate back and they can go back and look and say, hey, you know what, I marked this one for later, I didn't know, and I need to come back and think more about it. Or I know I answered that question, but I'm not sure, and I can go back and I can look at it. In an item adaptive test, that's not available because each question you're seeing is based on the one before. So this is more of the experience that students have had, which is being able to go through and do a bunch of questions, but also know that they can go back, they can check their work, they can come back to something that seemed more difficult if they wanted to kind of move on from it and come back to it. So it provides a different student testing experience. Both kinds of adaptive testing support shorter testing lengths, which is why we wanted to make sure to do adaptive testing. And to give you an example of multi-stage adaptive testing, not just the digital SAT, but a test like the GRE is also multi-stage adaptive. Whereas when you look at item adaptive, you're looking at things like SBAC and NWEA. So we went down the multi-stage adaptive testing route. So what does that kind of look like? A little bit more. So like I said, we want to make sure that students had shorter testing time. So all in all, the testing experience for students taking the SAT will be just over 2 hours. And so we wanted students to have that ability to show what they know without having to spend as much time sitting in a seat asking questions or answering questions. The questions are tailored according to the student's achievement. So like I said, they're going to answer questions in a module, and then the module that they see next is going to be based on their performance in that first module. It does allow students to navigate back to questions to be able to look at those. It does provide with a more secure testing opportunity as well. Students are seeing content that is specific to them. And then it allows for disruption of internet connectivity. And I feel like folks in Connecticut will appreciate this differently than anywhere else. I know we had, with this past year, we had a lot of situations where in doing the Cambium version of our test, there were internet disruptions that led to a lot of test irregularities, needs to retest students. Multi-stage adaptive testing allows us to provide students with test content and not have to require that there is uninterrupted internet connectivity. So if you're in a classroom and the internet connectivity should drop for a couple minutes, your test can continue. The student can continue, and they won't even really realize that the internet has dropped based on what they're experiencing in the test session. So I feel like this is a big win for folks in Connecticut because you've been through a lot this year with internet issues. But this should hopefully mean that we're seeing far fewer testing irregularities because we're not having to worry about internet connectivity issues, students potentially losing time for testing, and it should make things a lot more run more smoothly on your side. And then this allows for kind of very precise measurement of student ability. So that's kind of why we went the route of multi-stage adaptive testing. And my apologies, this is not a terribly clear graphic, but I do want to give you, I do think it was helpful to kind of get a sense of how this is going to work. So like I said, we're each section, so the reading and writing section and then the math section, each section will have 2 modules. Module 1 in that section is kind of a mix of questions, easy, medium, hard questions, kind of gets a sense how the student is performing. And then once the student completes that module, they're going to kind of move on seamlessly to Module 2, which gives the students the targeted questions based on their performance in Module 1. So it enables us to assess the content that the student really needs to be assessed on. So if a student is performing at a really high level, they don't need to take the time to answer some of the more basic questions. So their modules, their Module 2, we focus on that more advanced content. If a student isn't at that advanced content, if the student is really working still on a basic level, that student doesn't have to see all of the advanced content and not be able to answer it, and maybe and kind of have the challenges of not being able to answer these questions. The student can get content that's targeted towards their ability, so we can really measure that and see where can we put where can they be pushed a little bit as well. And so that's kind of how the multi-stage adaptive model that we have works. Ultimately, each of the sections, then what we get from those 2 modules is what leads us to getting to the student score. I think one of the biggest questions we've gotten, once people understand how the test is designed, the multi-stage adaptive approach, the next question is always, what do I need to make sure that I can give this test to my students? What are the tech specifications that we need to have? So we're going to go at a high level through some of this stuff here right now. Like I said, when we see each other back in September, when school starts again, and we kick off all the work we're going to do for spring 2024 testing, we'll really dig into details. I do want to call out, though, that on our website, and it's going to be at the end of you'll see our website, specifically the page for digital testing, will be at the end of this presentation. There are details, and lots of details if you're the kind of person who wants details. There are lots of details on our website that you can go and check out. So let's talk about, at a basic level, though, device requirements. So like I said, we designed this so that the devices that kids are using in schools and at home can be the devices that they're using to take this test. So you can take this test on a laptop, you can take this test on a tablet, or on a school-managed device, a Chromebook or a desktop. We will spend a lot of time in the beginning of the next school year making sure that we understand the devices that you're going to use to administer the spring 2024 testing, so we can make sure to provide you with the best support possible and the most specific support possible. A device should be able to hold a charge for 3 hours, which is a big difference from what you've experienced with Cambium so far, I think, with us, where we have said a device needs to hold a charge for 5 hours. So given that this test is significantly shorter, we are now saying that you need to make sure the device can hold a charge for 3 hours, and that device must be able to connect to Wi-Fi. So those 3 things are key elements of the requirements for devices for testing. Now, we do have some specific device specifications. Windows, laptops, and tablets have to be running Windows 10 or later, and they have to have at least 250 megabytes of free space available. Mac laptops must be running Mac OS 11.4 or later and have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. iPads must be running iPad OS 14 or later and have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. And school-managed Chromebooks must be running Chrome OS 100 or later and have at least 150 megabytes of free space available. You cannot run Bluebook on a personal Chromebook device. Bluebook is the student testing application that can only be downloaded on managed Chromebooks.
Oh, wait, can I stop you? Because I might have just given Liz Lisa.
No, you gave her the right answer.
Okay, because I got confused when you said the thing about Chromebooks, and I'm like, oh, sorry, Lisa. Maybe you can clarify that.
Yep. So for the Windows laptops and Mac laptops and iPads, those can be personal devices. If your school, they can be school-managed devices, school-owned and managed devices, or they can be personal devices that students bring to school and use. The Chromebooks are the only ones that need to be school-managed. So those are just kind of some things to understand. But we do, different than the current Cambium testing that you just experienced, students, if your school has students use their personal devices during the school day, you will be able to have students use personal devices for testing. So hopefully, we've tried to design it to think about the many different ways that that schools kind of support their students, and the technology working in schools. So so you weren't wrong, Michelle. It's only Chromebooks that need to be school managed Chromebooks.
Awesome. Well, there's another question we can take it now because you kind of talked about this, about the adaptive nature of the test. I understand that the second half of each test will be adaptive based on how the student answers on the first half, and that students will see different questions. But will students all see different questions on the first half too, or will the first half be the same for all students?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so to give you a sense, one of our test security features and one of the kind of features to provide students with a really secure experience is that students will not be seeing the same content as their neighbor. They're going to see questions that are about the same type of thing and are measuring the same skills and measuring the same abilities. But the literal details of the question itself will not be the same as the student next to them or the other students in the room even. So students are going to have a very, very much a personalized package of a personalized testing package. And that's gonna be true of module 1 and of module 2 in each section. Like I said, in module 1, they're going to be the same types of questions, measuring the same skills and knowledge and abilities, but the literal specific things in those questions, the numbers and some of that stuff will be different. So it provides the opportunity for security, and to make sure that we can allow students and be a little bit more flexible in some of our test security in the classroom features. So they will have different actual questions, although the content being measured will be the same. I know there's a question here about what specifically does it mean to be a school managed Chromebook. So Chromebooks that have that somebody in your school uses the Google Chromebook dashboard or console, I think they call it, to manage the content that gets the technology that gets pushed out to those Chromebooks. So I hope that is helpful. Okay, like I said, so a couple things to know on the tech side of the house here. We have a ton of information on our website. We will also, when we look ahead to next year, specifically to support Connecticut schools for spring 2024 testing, we will have, you're used to having webinars and trainings with us. We will have sessions specifically for tech coordinators too, because we know that that this is a big shift for tech coordinators, and we want to make sure that everybody has what they need, including tech coordinators, to make sure they're ready. And like I said, what we're going to do when we start the process of beginning for spring testing next year, we start the process early in the beginning of the year. We find out your school and who's your staff and all that kind of stuff. We are going to also ask you a number of questions about the technology that you're going to use, so that we can know the kinds of devices you're using, if they're school managed, if they're personal devices, if they're school owned, whatever it may be, and that way we can make sure you're getting the specific content and support that you need to support whatever your specific testing situation is going to look like. So there are some network requirements. So as I mentioned before, all students will need to be able to connect to Wi-Fi. All testing staff will also need to be able to connect to Wi-Fi. And so that's everybody needs to be able to have internet access to take the test, and everybody needs to be able to have internet access to give the test as well. This is less of an issue for in-school testing, but just to call out, we can support students taking the test. If you have students that are going to be taking the test for Connecticut SAT School Day at your school that are coming from another school, it doesn't happen often in Connecticut, but on occasion it does. We can also support and help you through how to make sure that your students, these students coming from other schools, are able to connect and have the test administered to them. So again, this will be one of those things that we'll ask about at the beginning of the year, so that if this is something that kind of looks like what you're going to need to support, we'll be able to provide you with the support you need. And yes, so Chromebooks must be school managed to be able to be used. I see that other question there. Okay. So let's talk about digital SAT practice, because we've talked about the test and giving the test and the tech you need. Digital SAT practice, it remains. We still have it, and we're gonna have a little bit some different practice opportunities. The Khan Academy and all of the practice available through Khan Academy is still available. It's available to students, and they can continue to go on to Khan and get the support that they need and practice for the test. We will also have a College Board practice experience, so that if you have students that are not going on to Khan, they're not creating their own College Board account, and they're going on, they're not going on to Khan on their own, they still have the opportunity to have a practice experience. And I just want to call out, so in Connecticut SAT school day testing, all of our school day testing, but for Connecticut moving forward, students will not need a College Board account to be able to take part in College Board digital testing or use digital practice. And so the College Board practice that we've designed is designed so that students do not have to have a College Board account to access and use it. The College Board practice is going to allow students to have familiarity with the Blue Book application. So it's one of those things where I think we want to make sure that students are very familiar before they head into a testing room, are very familiar with the testing application that they are going to be using, that they can be most comfortable with it, and that using this new technology for them is not going to impact their ability to do well on the test. So we want them to have the opportunity to be familiar with Blue Book, and all of kind of the tools and bells and whistles that are in there with Blue Book, and we'll talk about that shortly. And then that we do have full-length practice exams available for the SAT. So if you wanted to go check it out right now, you can go on our website. You can check out the full-length digital SAT practice test and kind of experience it a little bit yourself. So when we talk about practice broadly, and when we're going to focus on practice next year preparing for Connecticut SAT school day, our focus is going to be talking about the College Board practice experience. But do know that students who want to still have the Khan practice experience will still have access to do that. So as I mentioned, there's practice tests on Blue Book. We want kids to be able to know what they're going to experience. It is currently available. The experience is the exact same as the testing experience for them. Now, the one that's up on the website right now is focused on weekend testing. There are some slight differences, not in the test itself, but some slight differences in the kind of getting in and setup process that'll happen in school day. But if the kids want to experience, or you want to see what the test looks like in a digital platform, it's there. It's going to look just like it looks in there. Kids can go in and retake those practice tests as often as they want. So it's a chance for them to get to get in there and check it out if they'd like to. And like I said, if you want to check it out, go ahead and check it out. The app that we're using, Blue Book, that we have designed, this is a proprietary app that we have designed just for our testing. And I bring that up because I actually think that will be super helpful. You've experienced us using a platform that wasn't designed for our testing. We were using another company's platform, and there were some things that were great about it, and then there were some things that were more challenging for our test. And so we have built this app to support exactly how this test works. There are a number of tools built into it to make the student testing experience as simple as possible, as kind of complete as possible, and kind of as supported as possible. So we do have in Blue Book a built-in graphing calculator and reference sheets. As I mentioned, kids have the opportunity to use the calculator on both parts of the math section. There is no more no calculator section, and they can use, if they'd like to use the built-in graphing calculator, it's there. Every student then has access to a built-in graphing calculator. If a student prefers to use their own, they will still be able to bring their own graphing calculator, but this tool is built into the system for them. There's the opportunity to flag and review questions. Michelle, do you want to pop in?
I just wanted to ask you, because our students are familiar with using the Desmos calculator for Smarter Balance, and I know that it was also a tool through Cambium. So how different is the tool that's in Blue Book from that?
That is a good question. I don't have specifics on that, Michelle, but let's get that, because I know
Okay.
know we wanted to try to be consistent with what students have been experiencing. So, so let me
And
follow up.
obviously on College Board, they could, SAT, they could bring their own calculator, but I guess I'm curious to know the differences. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we can definitely do that. And I think it's a great call out for next year of making sure we've got some clarity on what is in this calculator. So
There's also a question from Robert about Khan and if it's changing.
so I believe Khan has changed their practice program a little bit, obviously to more align with the new test. So it will be, again, a similar experience for students if they go to practice with Khan. I got to be honest with you, I'm not 100% familiar with all of the changes that may have happened with the Khan program, but it did need to change at the very least a little bit to support being a practice opportunity for students for this new test. As I was mentioning, there's the opportunity to flag and review questions. Like I said earlier, with multi-stage adaptive testing, students can do do their section and flag things, go back and review it. And so we have tools built in to flag and review questions. There is a testing timer, and students have the ability to hide the timer if they would like. Some students do not like to see time ticking down, and some students can't handle that. And so kids can hide it if they want. Other kids want to see that timer. So there is the flexibility to hide it or not. There's a number of annotation tools for students to be able to use, highlighting and crossing out things and all that kind of stuff that they can use to support them when they're taking the test. So there's a lot of tools built in. And as I mentioned, if you want to see it in action, go check out the practice. Go check out the practice test because you can experience it. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that when we're starting to roll out information, very officially for Connecticut SAT school day in the fall, that we'll have clear information about all of the different tools in the testing platform for kids. The next topic is accommodations. I don't have a ton to say on accommodations today. I did want to just address a couple things, just so that everybody understands that we will still have testing accommodations. We know that kids have very specific needs, and we are here to support them. The process for requesting accommodations will remain the same. It will continue to happen through SSD Online. There will be some different things you'll see in SSD Online to support requesting accommodations for students with digital testing, but it will still take place in SSD Online. We will provide a crosswalk in the fall, so it's clear how the paper accommodations that a student may be approved for, what that's going to translate into digital testing, and so that it's as easy as possible for you guys to know. Did you request everything a student needs? Is there something else you need to do? We'll make that really clear for you. I think I'll do this last bullet point and then come back to another thing I want to say. There are some accommodations requests that won't be needed anymore. So like large print, there's a zoom in feature that really should be able to support the needs of students who need large print or kind of large text, and a large answer sheet or magnification devices, things like that. Just they won't really be needed as accommodations anymore, so you won't need to request those types of things. Again, we'll have a full listing in the fall of stuff that you don't necessarily need to request anymore, even if a student needs it, because there'll be universal supports in the platform. One thing I do want to call out here while talking about accommodations, though, which I know is a pain point that has been felt particularly by Connecticut SST coordinators and test coordinators, is you will not have to do anything in Test A Toolkit or in Blue Book like what you had to do in TIDE in terms of setting accommodations settings. So, for every student who had accommodations, you had to set the timing or the features that they needed, or just that they had an accommodation. And so you won't have to do that anymore. What will happen is what's in a student's SSD Online account and in their profile will be what's used to determine the testing package and functions that are automatically configured when they go into Blue Book to take the test. So you as a test coordinator, you as SSD coordinator will not have to go through that process of saying, oh, this kid has extended time, so I have to set this section and this section and this section. You won't have to do that anymore. It's going to be already configured in the platform for you. What you'll need to do is you'll need to make sure that what's in a student's SSD online account is accurate, because that's how we know what to configure for them. And you'll need to check before testing to make sure that that has kind of translated over to the into Test Day Toolkit and Blue Book correctly. But you will not have to go through the process of setting all of those accommodations. We know it's time consuming, and it wasn't a great experience, and we're really happy that you don't have to do that experience again. So that is the big takeaway I hope everybody takes from the accommodations part of today. Like I said, we're going to give you a ton more information in the fall, very specific stuff that you can use to really get everything moving smoothly for your students. I would also like to say we want to encourage you to get accommodations requests in. Really, let's focus on kind of, you want to get through. I know the beginning of the school year is crazy, and some of you do fall testing and all that kind of stuff. We'll want to make sure that come December-ish that you're really prepared to make sure everything's in place to start the process, at least, to make sure everything's in place for your students for the spring, so that it can go as smoothly as possible. I feel like this particular model of testing that we have is a good example of if all the work is done well on the front end, your experience on test day is going to be super, super smooth. The experience for your students is going to be super, super smooth, and it's going to be kind of, I think, a very refreshing experience to have testing that runs that smoothly. It does require upfront checking and upfront making sure you're doing what you need to do, and that will be my job and James's job and Keisha's job to make sure that you have what you need to take all the steps you need to take before testing, and that we can support you, that if you see something early on, you can reach out, we can make sure it's all set up for you, we can help you through whatever problems, so that when we find ourselves, in the spring and you're actually doing testing, it's going to be hopefully a much calmer, much easier experience for you. Okay, can students change the font size and background colors on their own? I believe they can change the font size. They can zoom in and out and make those changes. I believe the same is true for color. Keisha, I don't know if you have more insight into that than I do.
I'm not completely sure, so I don't want to misadvise. So we'll make sure that's included in the follow-up. Yes.
Yes, we'll do that. Awesome. Okay, so this is a great question. Starting in September 2023, do we have to reapply for the accommodations even if a student has already been approved? You do not have to reapply. Keisha, I'm right there, right? Like
you are spot on. I was just about to start typing, so I'm glad you responded.
Yes, you do not have to reapply. There are going to be some things, if a student is approved for MP3 in SSD Online right now, that student will it will automatically kind of be approved for text-to-speech in the digital testing. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff. You are not starting from scratch by any stretch of the imagination. All the work you've done up to this point is going to pay off for you there may be some things though, and I think it's worth thinking about as you have conversations with students and families over the next couple months, because digital testing is a different experience, and you guys are kind of halfway there, right? Because you've been doing digital testing with us for 2 years, but it's worth kind of thinking about, is there something different or maybe less or whatever it may be that the student needs in a digital testing environment. So again, we'll have supports to be able to help you have those conversations. But the work you've done so far is going to pay off. Everything is going to have a translation into digital, and you don't have to reapply for those things.
Adrian, there was a question about what happens on a weekend test when a student doesn't have a device. I replied that College Board will provide devices for students who request them when they register, but there was an additional follow-up. Will they be sent to the student or the test center? And I just want to make sure I didn't misspeak, and maybe you can add some more to that.
Yeah, so for weekend testing, we do have a device lending program. We don't want device access to limit any student's ability to take the test. And so if a student, during the registration process, they can request that we provide them with a device. We go through kind of a little bit of a vetting process, and then if a student needs a device, what we in most cases will do is send that device to the test center, so that it can be so that in advance of testing, that center can make sure that the device is set up to work on the network and everything's all set up for that student. So like I said, in most cases, I say that because there's always an exception to the rule, but in most cases it's going to the test center. And then the test center is responsible for returning it as well. Okay, let's talk about Spring 2024 Connecticut SAT School Day. This is super high level, but I do want to call out a number of things. Okay, in September, I mentioned this a few times, we're going to have a ton of stuff to share with you in September. We're going to have milestones and a timeline document and everything to help orient you to what you need to do and when you need to do it. Again, I hope and I think you're going to find this experience to be a far simpler experience than preparing for Cambium Digital SAT. But we do want to make sure that when you're back in September, you've got everything you need to know and you've got kind of a checklist to follow and a timeline to follow. We will have a bunch of training opportunities. We will have training opportunities for test coordinators and tech coordinators and SSD coordinators. We'll have modules available. We'll have webinars available. We'll have some in-person stuff available. But we know that this is new, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you have what you need to make this smooth. We will also have a ton of resources to support you. And these resources will support kind of planning for testing, all the stuff you need to think about as you're thinking a few months in the future and making sure you're ready to do this. What are the things you need to consider? And what are the steps you need to take? We'll have a lot of information about technical preparedness so that the tech person in your school and the tech person in your district knows exactly what they need to do. We will have a lot of information about requesting accommodations. And like I said, you're not going to have to start from scratch, but you are going to probably still have to request accommodations for somebody at some point. And so we'll have what you need to support that. And then we will have lots of supports for how you administer the test to all of your students. So whether that student is a standard test taker, or the student has accommodations, or the student has EL supports, we'll make sure it's really clear for you about how you do what you do and need to do in the testing room for their students. So we are excited. A couple things to know. A lot of what you've come to learn to experience with us are these really long, complicated manuals with tons and tons and tons of information in there, but there's a lot to get through and stuff can get lost. We have taken a very different approach with our testing guides going forward. So you will find them, they will be much clearer and plainer in how we say things. They'll be much more focused on these are the things you need to do to support you in the actions you need to take. And hopefully they'll be a lot easier for you to find what you need in them. So that's the other big change that we're kind of undergoing right now as we work on preparedness for next year for you guys. So with all of that, that's our high level overview of the new digital SAT. We're happy to take questions from anybody if you anything you want to ask. I know we've had a few questions throughout the in the chat. You have our contact information here. Obviously, you have our folks from CSDE. You also have our contact information, the field team in Connecticut, the SSD support information. And here's the digital SAT website that has the information about the new digital SAT is up there for you to use as well. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes. Actually, I see Nicola has a question in the chat. Will we be testing PSATs in October? Will we have training long before that? So if you're doing PSATs, if you're doing fall testing, the training for fall testing, I believe, opens in the end of August, very beginning of September. So you will have information that you need there. The College Readiness Assessments team is going to be continuing to roll out more and more information over the next couple of months, and then really at the very beginning of the school year when you get back to support you for to support what you need to do for fall testing. The ordering process is different for fall testing than it's been before. So we have a new tool, the SSOR, and is the name of the tool, and I'm forgetting what that stands for. But it's the new TOS, if you will. So that has been rebuilt to support what you need to do to order fall testing now, and to be prepared to do all you need to do going forward. So so there is a on the digital page for fall, there's a module that can show you how to use SSOR actually right now. And like I said, we will be rolling out a bunch of stuff for fall testing when you get back. Actually, it'll be really, a lot of it'll be up over the summer in anticipation of you getting back, and then the online modules will roll out the very, very end of August or the first week of September. So in terms of the accommodations requests and the timeline for that, the timeline for accommodations requests is going to remain the same right now. So basically, the deadline for accommodations requests, if you back it up 7 weeks from when you're going to test, that is basically your deadline for accommodations requests. So that will be very familiar, I think, to you in what you've experienced. The question, and then for the SAT in spring, it'll be the same thing. That's 7 week for the SAT in spring, and we'll talk about the kind of Connecticut process for that next year when we get into next year. Okay, can you talk about paper school day SAT for fall 23? Is this required? Pro cons of offering school day SAT in both the fall and the spring. Okay, so while PSAT, NMSQT, and PSAT 8-9 are moving to the digital platform in the fall, the SAT school day in the fall will remain paper, as are the weekend fall test dates. They're also remaining paper. The reason for that is because kids that took the test, whether it was paper or digital, this specific version of the SAT in the spring to support the work that they'll do in their senior year, we didn't want them to have an entirely different experience when they came back in the fall. So we are supporting the continued paper SAT for the fall, as in both the school day and the weekend. And so the digital SAT domestically will roll out with the spring 2024 administration, and that's when Connecticut will be giving their first new digital spring SAT administration. So in terms of pros and cons of offering both school day SAT in the fall and the spring, I'm going to leave that up to other people to talk about. I think there's certainly pros and cons of it. Sometimes people want to give kids another testing opportunity. They took the first shot in the spring, and sometimes they want to give kids the opportunity in the fall. Sometimes people don't want to do that. Sometimes they say, if a kid wants a chance to test, there's plenty of opportunities to test on a weekend, especially in the state of Connecticut. There's lots and lots of test centers, and a kid can go and do that, and they can do it also for free if they're a fee waiver eligible student. And so that's, I think, something for you as a school and you as a district to determine what you think your students need. But we are committed to supporting students to have a similar testing experience that they had in the spring, in the fall, so that they're not kind of in the midst of trying to apply for colleges dealing with a different test, or a redesigned kind of version of the test. The question here, does
just jump in real quick though, because one of her questions was, is it required to test SAT in the fall? And no, it's not. It's not a state requirement. So it's up to you as to whether you decide you want to offer a school day version of the SAT for your 12th graders.
So this is a great question. Does the fall PSAT have the embedded calculator option for the full test? So is there no more? Is that also true for PSAT? That is correct. PSAT, the calculator is embedded, and you can use calculator on the whole thing. I think somebody earlier kind of figured out that means that you don't need the 4-function calculator requested accommodation anymore, because the calculator is available on the whole math section.
Okay, we'll wait in a moment and see if anyone has any other questions, but obviously you can email me, although it's the general assessment that's up there, but let me just put mine into the chat. There is my email. So if anyone has any, here's another question about Blue Book.
Okay.
Blue Book.
Sure. Has the Blue Book app been thoroughly checked with multiple screen readers for professional braille displays? Okay, so I'm going to turn this one over to Keisha because she's my girl on this content.
So yes, for the Blue Book app, the refreshable braille displays, are used in conjunction for screen readers for students who will require screen readers. And of course, if just not a part of your question, but to add, if your student does require braille paper pencil, you can request for that in SSD, and we will be able to provide that. So there's more than one option, but yes, there have been a lot of checks to ensure that we are delivering accommodations for our visual students who can use it through the digital platform. We will have that available and we are set to go. And we've actually been doing this, just for everyone's awareness, we have been doing this for international. We started out with the pilots and then we did for international SAT, and we have had really great results for